So in school, all of us learned about the different types of conflicts. There's man versus man, man versus self, man versus society, and man versus nature. In professional auto racing, the different types of conflicts are driver versus driver, driver versus self, driver versus sanctioning body, and driver versus track circumstances. For driver Juan Pablo Montoya, he knows a thing or two about all four types of these conflicts, especially in the Brickyard 400. This isn't just a story about how Juan Pablo Montoya tried to join NASCAR's elite by winning the Brickyard 400, but it is also a story of how Juan Pablo Montoya battled the four different types of conflict, often at the same time. NRF Productions presents Juan Pablo Montoya vs. the Brickyard 400. For Juan Pablo Montoya, he will forever have a soft spot for the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and it's easy to see why. This was a track and a location that forever changed Juan Pablo Montoya's career, starting with the 2000 Indianapolis 500. In this race, Montoya dazzled the Indianapolis crowd with something that hadn't been done since 1967. This was a rookie dominating and winning the Indianapolis 500. At the time, Juan Pablo Montoya was the biggest one-hit wonder in Indy 500 history. Not because he fell off, but Montoya's win in this race helped propel him to a world-class racing career. Montoya would take his talents to many different continents as a full-time driver on the Formula One grid. During Juan Pablo Montoya's F1 career, there was just one United States race on the schedule. The United States Grand Prix, which was a competition held on the road course configuration at, you guessed it, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So when it comes to Juan Pablo Montoya's career in the Indianapolis GP, it yielded mixed results. He earned himself 2 top 10 finishes, but also 2 DNFs, a DNQ, and a did not start. In 2005, Montoya drove for the McLaren team, which was one of the teams that decided to protest the infamous 2005 USGP. So while Juan Pablo Montoya was a successful driver on the F1 paddock, he was looking for something a little more fun. Beginning in 2007, Juan Pablo Montoya would showcase his talents primarily in the United States via the US's #1 motorsport, NASCAR. The storied open-wheel racer would partner up with open-wheel's most historic team, Chip Ganassi Racing, which had a 3-car team in the NASCAR Cup Series. So when you look back at Juan Pablo Montoya's career, it is most remembered for Sonoma. This was a race where Juan Pablo Montoya made NASCAR history as the first Colombian-born driver to win a Cup Series race. The other notable thing about Juan Pablo Montoya's rookie season was that he would return to the Indianapolis Oval. This was the same hollow grounds and same track configuration that forever changed his life. This time, however, he would be racing in a 400-mile race rather than the Indy 500. The 2007 Brickyard 400 was historic for Juan Pablo Montoya. By taking the green flag, he became the first ever driver to start the Indy 500, Indy GP, and the Brickyard 400. In this race, Montoya put up a valiant effort in order to attempt to preserve his undefeated record on the Indianapolis Oval. The Chip Ganassi Racing Dodges swept the front row for the race and actually showcased competitive race pace. Anchoring the charge was the driver that knew the Indianapolis Oval like the back of his hand. Juan Pablo Montoya in his first stock car race at Indy would outrun Brickyard 400 champions like Jeff Gordon and Kevin Harvick on pure pace. His second place finish in the Brickyard 400 proved to be his best oval finish of the year. Motorsports enthusiasts alike were anticipating his return to Indianapolis for his second start in the Brickyard 400. Early in the race, Juan Pablo Montoya looked to have a top 10, possibly top 5 car. Unfortunately, for the second time in his career, Juan Pablo Montoya would be impacted by a controversial Indy race. On lap 29, Juan Pablo Montoya cut a tire. The tire caused tremendous damage to the suspension and inner workings of the car. This effectively ended any chance that Juan Pablo Montoya had at getting a good finish. So in his first 2 Brickyard starts, Juan Pablo Montoya had his fair amount of exposure with the different types of conflict. However, things would be ramped up to an entirely different level for Juan Pablo Montoya's 3rd attempt at winning the Brickyard 400. Juan Pablo Montoya was hoping that the 3rd time was the charm. He was getting the hang of these NASCAR ovals as shown by his statistics in 2009. By winning the 2009 Brickyard 400, Juan Pablo Montoya could establish himself as a legitimate NASCAR driver by winning his first oval victory in one of NASCAR's crown jewels. Based on the 42's paint scheme for this race, which was a throwback to Montoya's Indy 500 winning ride, the 42 and JPM were extremely confident that they could go out there and win. On pole qualifying day, Juan Pablo Montoya put up a lap that was good enough to start from the outside pole. During the race itself, Juan Pablo Montoya was taming all of the different sides of conflict based on his performance in the first half. In the first 100 laps of the race, Juan Pablo Montoya had led 92 of them. What Juan Pablo Montoya was doing was incredible. It was still mind-blowing that an open-wheel driver wasn't just competing against the NASCAR guys, but he was absolutely beating them down to a small pulp based on how he was performing in a race statistically won by Cup champions and future Hall of Famers. Juan Pablo Montoya was speeding into the NASCAR history books. When it came to the 2009 Brickyard 400, no driver was beating Juan Pablo Montoya unless Juan Pablo Montoya chose to beat himself. On the money stop of the race, the pit crew did their job, but unfortunately, Juan Pablo Montoya would beat himself.
42 car was too fast on pit road.
Juan Pablo Montoya was busted for speeding in zones 2 and 4 of the IMS pit road. Originally, Juan Pablo Montoya was furious and tried to deny that he had beaten himself.
3 green lights all the way from before, maybe 30 yards before the line.
There was even a point where he went after NASCAR.
You know, I never badmouth NASCAR, but if they do this to me, I'm gonna kill them.
Basically saying, my name is Juan Pablo Montoya, you killed my dreams and aspirations, prepare to die. Eventually, Juan Pablo Montoya would have to accept the facts. He beat himself, and as he rolled down the IMS pit road at an uncompetitive pace, he saw 2-time, eventually 3-time Brickyard 400 winner Jimmie Johnson pass him right by. Ultimately, Juan Pablo Montoya finished outside the top 10 in this race, primarily because he beat himself. After the race, many NASCAR champions and future Hall of Famers sympathized with Montoya. They completely understood that beating yourself is just part of racing. Juan Pablo Montoya was heartbroken, but he would have just as good of a chance to conquer the Brickyard 400 the next season. Right as Juan Pablo Montoya entered the media center of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, he was instantly met with man versus man conflict. The debate amongst the media was who really had the fastest car in the 2009 Brickyard 400. Jimmie Johnson believed that it was the 48. Juan Pablo Montoya, he was just a beneficiary of the clean air. Johnson cited that once he lost the track position, his car just wasn't the same. Juan Pablo Montoya fired back with vengeance. Montoya claimed that the 42 had the best car, the 5 was second, and then the 48 was the third or fourth best. So for Juan Pablo Montoya, there was only one natural way to settle this debate. dominate, and win the Brickyard 400. In qualifying, he would put up the fastest lap and lead the field to green in the Brickyard 400. Coincidentally, it would be the 48 on his outside. Montoya would race his new racing nemesis hard. On lap 21, Montoya used the outside to power past Jimmie Johnson and take a commanding lead. Juan Pablo Montoya, on that afternoon, was racing with something to prove. With 21 laps to go in the race, Montoya had led 86 laps and was well on his way to joining NASCAR's elite as a Brickyard 400 champion. And the thing is, who was going to stop him? Juan Pablo Montoya was better than the other 42 drivers. He had fully mastered himself, and he was doing a great job navigating the changing track conditions of Indianapolis. Juan Pablo Montoya was mastering the different types of conflicts, except driver versus sanctioning body. A small piece of debris off of the racing line changed everything. The caution created a split strategy even within the Earnhardt Ganassi Racing team. Jamie McMurray elected for 2 tires. Meanwhile, Juan Pablo Montoya and Brian Patty didn't want to do anything too flashy. They went for the traditional 4 tires and fuel. When the green flag came out and the race resumed, suddenly Juan Pablo Montoya's Chevrolet was unrecognizable. He was getting passed left and right by drivers on the same tire strategy as him. Ultimately, Montoya fell to 10th place and was ranked as the 4th best driver on 4 tires. At the blink of an eye, Juan Pablo Montoya was now dealing with 4 different conflicts at the same time. Juan Pablo Montoya wasn't just getting beat by other drivers, but he was proving his critics right. He was one Fradro Montoya, clean air merchant. Now, after the sanctioning body decided to throw a caution for a piece of debris well off the racing line, Juan Pablo Montoya was struggling with the Indianapolis track conditions. At this point, it was full panic mode for Juan Pablo Montoya. Juan Pablo Montoya, getting desperate, got risky trying to get every 10th of a second out of that car. Unfortunately, all of the conflicts Juan Pablo Montoya was dealing with got the best of him.
Oh, no, trouble right at the pit end.
Yeah, we're leaders.
Juan Pablo has damage to the right side. You're right, Andy. Look at this. Oh, man, what disappointment for the 42.
As it would play out, the Earnhardt Ganassi Racing team split strategy paid off. Jamie McMurray brought back the Brickyard 400 trophy to the EGR shop. Juan Pablo Montoya brought back the steering wheel. This would be a tough loss for Juan Pablo Montoya to get over, even as a month later, he had racing redemption at his hands at Watkins Glen. Juan Pablo Montoya would win his second and, as it would turn out, final race of his NASCAR Cup Series career. Unfortunately, Juan Pablo Montoya just didn't have the pace at the Brickyard 400 that he did in 2009 and 2010. Unfortunately, for how talented and adaptable Juan Pablo Montoya was in NASCAR, he never won a Cup Series oval race. Even more tragic is his Brickyard 400 legacy. When you look at the most dominant losses in Brickyard 400 history measured by laps led, Juan Pablo Montoya accounts for 2 of the top 5. Despite his misfortunes in the Brickyard 400, Montoya would get redemption at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, scoring one final victory at the track in the 2015 Indianapolis 500. So for Juan Pablo Montoya, never winning the Brickyard 400 was unfortunate, not just because of those circumstances and how it could have changed the perception of his career. Juan Pablo Montoya versus the Brickyard 400 is one of the most notable instances of man versus conflict and ultimately how a driver succumbed to that pressure.